What's up, guys? That's right. You see the title. What's the true meaning of happiness? Now, happiness, as I've explained before, is a fleeting emotion, right? And growing up, we associate happiness with money, cars, a nice house, relationships, success. But it's like, what happens when you achieve those things, right? Are you still happy? It's like you come down to where we're actually talking about happiness versus pleasure, right? Because you have pleasure, which can be a social gathering, entertainment, food, shopping, all the sorts, right? But are we really happy, right? Is the pleasure the distraction from not being happy? Is it a distraction? Are we constantly trying to please ourselves so that we won't sit in our own thoughts and realize what we really are? So we won't sit in our thoughts and actually face reality, face where we're actually at in life, right? There are a lot of unsober people. There's a lot of people that depend on drugs to get them through the day. It's a lot of people that depend on drugs for pleasure and for a false tense or false reality of happiness. Because once you stop spending money on drugs, once you can afford those drugs, or once you're spending your last on drugs, that's when it becomes a problem because now you're very dependent on something outside of yourself. You're now dependent on another entity, all right, outside of yourself. What are you like during your sober mind? And I mean, for months, years on end, right, without touching anything. Who are you really? Is it really easy to actually just quit drugs like that if you're so dependent on them, right? Just to get through the day, just for it to simmer down your anxiety, your stress, and your depression, all right? Leveling out how you feel about things, right? Leveling out, pretty much your life. And without those drugs, here comes the anxiety, here comes the depression, and here comes the stress. So it's like, how do you deal with that? And then you realize without the drugs, you're really not that happy. You've really just been investing in distractions to keep you happy, quote unquote. You're not really happy. You're not really actually growing as a person. And then you start to realize, why do I need drugs to be happy? Right? When you really start to sit in your thoughts and sit in a sober reality and you actually face life face to face, okay? Nose to nose, and you look it straight in the eye, right? With a sober mind, you start to question, actually, who are you? Really? Really? It's like you've created this space, you created this reality, you've created this world, right? But without a clouded judgment, you really don't know who you are, you know? And that's something that you need to be focused on. You need to be thinking about. Who am I really? How did I get here? What am I doing with my life? And how can I become a happier person? Right? You're dealing with the daily stresses of life. Working a job you hate, you may be in a relationship that you hate. But even with that, if you're depending on a drug to keep you happy, you can just as well depend on a person to keep you happy, right? A relationship with that person to keep you happy. And when that person leaves or decides to leave you, or, maybe you guys, or she or he or she grows apart from you, it's like now they're walking out with your heart, they're walking out with your happiness. So it's very vital and important that you keep yourself happy. You're happy first internally before you go seeking outside sources to keep you happy. I hope that makes sense. Because just as you're using drugs, you can use another person for distraction, right? To keep you happy, or the false sense or tense of being happy. And it's like, how do you become happy internally? I'll tell you how. And I've realized this as I've become more and more into the sober mind. I've realized how anxious I was. Now, just how you can use pleasure to distract you from happiness, or you can use it as a distraction, right? Anxiety was distracting me from being happy, being anxious all the time, thinking too far ahead, all right? Just wanting the day to be over because you already know what's going to happen, instead of enjoying the little moments. I realized that I become more and more anxious about things that I have to do throughout the day, things that have to be accomplished, right? It made me very, very anxious. Tasks that I had to do, that I had to complete, right? Working 13-hour days. Now, even on my days off, still just filled with anxiety because I know that I had to clean out my storage. The lawn had to be mowed. I had to run a couple different areas. It's just things that ought not be to make you that anxious, but actually it made me that anxious. Becoming in that sober reality. And every time I got anxious, I distracted myself from the anxiety to make me happy. I distracted myself. The anxiety, the anxiousness. And now, when I see myself or catch myself being anxious, I calm my mind. I take a deep breath and I start to look at the very millisecond, the very present time that I'm living in, instead of thinking about the past or thinking about the future. It calms my mind when I know that I'm only handling it, or handling life, millisecond by millisecond, not even by seconds, just thinking by milliseconds, thinking by the breath, just being engulfed into the present moment of things. It's like when I catch myself being anxious, I realize that I'm actually wanting It's like, because my mind, I used to being gifted and talented, and I am a smart person, right? I would say, to an extent. And it's like my mind is so far ahead that it makes me anxious. And I've learned, listening to my wife, she said, just live in a moment. And I say, I would rebuttal. I would say, no, we have to live for the future. And I don't think she was saying that, you know, don't think about the future, but actually just enjoy the present moment more. And now I've come to realize that what she told me was very vital in living. Because if you're not engulfed in the present moment, 9 times out of 10, it will cause anxiety. You're thinking about the future way too much. Now, you need everything in moderation. Everything needs to be moderated. It can't be too much. Yes, you think about your future. You plan for the future. But do not think about the future every millisecond of the day. This will distract you from true happiness. Anything external and not internal will distract you from true happiness. And I believe this wholeheartedly. I say to myself, I'm moving too fast. My brain is moving way too fast. You have to slow down. You have to ease your mind almost into a meditation like state without closing your eyes, without doing anything of the sort, but just keeping your brain peaceful, calm, and clear. This is what helps me. I realized that I started to do drugs mainly for the purpose of being too anxious. So I started to think, let's go to the soul problem. Being anxious is the root cause of me not being happy, the root cause of me developing a sort of depression, and the root cause of developing that stress on a day to day basis. That pit in my stomach I was talking about, it causes that. And I had to realize that. I had to slow down mentally. Just always moving, moving. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? You have to slow down. Gotta be at peace and have a sound mind. And I used to look at the monks, right? And sometimes they would sit there, like one can sit there Indian style and meditate for hours on end. I used to think, how can you sit still for that amount of time? And I realized it comes over time. First of all, you have to practice something like that. And second of all, there's no distractions. You see, distractions will keep you away from your internal self. These are all things that I had to realize. When it when you're not distracted, it's more easier for you to become happy internally. And happiness by no means is a permanent state, but even a meaningful life can still have stress, disappointment, boredom, uneasiness, depression, and anxiety. It's just, what will you choose to do when those things arise? How will you respond? How will you react to these things? These are things you need to think about as well. It's your boy J Tuna 900. Drop it in the comments. What do you do when you feel yourself getting anxious? Like, what are some of your methods and techniques to get rid of it? I would love to know. All right. This is J Tuna 900, the Growth Hub. And I will see you on the next video. Peace.